This is London edition of Screaming Creativity with two Americans here in London, but you spent a lot of time here. I'm going to read. You have so many accomplishments. Multi-industry executive and leader, iconic career spanning CEO of Burberry, SVP of retail at Apple, chair of Save the Children International, and now a senior operating advisor for Sky Partners with 2 Ks. There's probably a million other things you've done. You're also on the board of Ralph Lauren, Airbnb, but we're lucky to have her as the amazing board member of WPP. And so please welcome Angela Ahrendts.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
We just spent a whole day doing some interesting, fun, great strategy meetings, but we're going to get to some of that about WPP. I think the audience and people, I think you're one of those people that people know of you but don't know all the things you've done. So I've just rattled off a couple things, but like, where are you from? What's your life? It's not going to be this is your life, but I think it'd be interesting for people to hear.
Yeah, I think you're right, because it's funny, it's that little bit of context when people, maybe even some people think you're odd or maybe unique or something, right? Yeah. But where did that come from? And it's
I get
funny.
Odd mostly, unique not so much, but odd mostly. I like it.
Yeah, and it's funny. I used to sum it up by saying that that I'm from a really big family in a really small town. So I'm one of 6 kids, and there's 6 of us in 7 years. So can you imagine?
And
so
my
they're
wife.
right,
Yeah,
and so
9 kids in like 12 years.
Yeah, so it was super busy and loud and crazy, and my parents were kind of hippies. My dad had an afro and wore a peace sign belt buckle, and my mom wore the mini skirts, and and played Cat Stevens all the time, and Harry Chapin, and so we kind of had our own commune, if you will, right? But I used to say my mom always had this spiritual side, and my father was really well read and had this philosopher side, and so for my 12th birthday, I get As a Man Thinketh by James Allen, and The Prophet by Kahlil Gibran, and
I don't know that book now. Just to be clear.
So my dad was very, very philosophical, and so that's kind of the, and very competitive in sports. 5 girls, 1 boy, and we had our own band, our own team.
What was the band? What was your instrument?
French horn.
French horn. Listen.
And piano.
French horn's pretty cool.
Well, the flute was taken, the clarinet was taken, the saxophone was taken, the drum. So what was left? They needed a bass.
It's better than the tuba. I think the French horn better than the tuba. But this background of your mother, being spiritual, your father being philosophical, that sort of it's made for someone who wants to be a creative person. So there has to be some level of creativity you've always grown up with or grown around.
Yeah, no, my mother, both of them, incredibly creative, but especially my mom. Absolutely.
What was her thing?
Well, you're raising 6 kids, so it was, always the house, and I come from very, very humble beginnings, and so my mom would sew a lot of our stuff, and you'd get the hand-me-downs, and, I'd get the jeans that were too short, but she'd put the triangles in them with the patches,
so
and,
cool.
You know what I mean? Everything was aesthetic to my mom. Right. It had to be, and if you go to one of my kids' houses today, they'll do the same thing. I mean, they set the table and they.
So when you go to your kid's house and you see, does it remind you of your mother when you see this level of detail?
Oh, absolutely, because I got it from her, and so I did the same thing with my kids, and they get embroidered napkins for Christmas instead of just but. But I think it's important. I think life is a beautiful thing, and it's even more beautiful when you make it that way.
So this was New Palestine in Indiana, place of basketball. For those not from the U.S., Indiana is like the state of basketball. Were you an athlete growing up?
Absolutely. Played tennis. I didn't do basketball. Oddly enough, I did more individual sports. I did gymnastics for years, and I played tennis. So
why is that? Why do you think? Because I feel like you are the ultimate team player, certainly for us for WPP. So why don't you think you've been attracted to the team sports?
I think I lived with a team, with all of us. And I think I needed to prove myself. I needed to do something on my own, and ran track, and I think swam. I mean, you name it, we did it. When you have 6 kids, you keep them really busy all the time and wear them out. So
I got the creative side from your growing up with a spiritual mother and a philosophical father, but you've gone on to be CEO of giant companies in fashion. Obviously you have a great fashion sense, but your ability to take Burberry, which wasn't doing particularly well at the time, I think, when you took it over, and then when you left, it was one of the hottest companies. So was fashion something you grew up with? Was it the thing you're in Indiana? It's not New York City or L.A. or Miami. You're in a place that maybe isn't known for, forward-thinking fashion. But What was it that attracted you to that sector of the world?
Yeah, no, it's a really great question. And I think that, when you're young, you really don't know what you want to do. But I did grow up sewing, and I lived vicariously through fashion magazines and, would sign up for every fashion magazine subscription. And so then when it came time to go to university, there was a Ball State University, which was only an hour and a half from the house. And I had to go to a state school because we couldn't afford anything else. But they had an incredible merchandising and a marketing program. And the first year there, we took a trip to New York and went behind the scenes of 10 incredible designers and learned even more. And at that point, I'm moving to New York. I mean, I went to school to get out, and I'm going to move to New York, and I'm going to make it in the It just all became so crystal clear.
Did you want to be a designer? Like, what was your thing? Did you say, you know what, I want to be a designer, I want to be a model, I want to work with models, I want to I want to design, I want to be the marketer? What was the thing?
When you're young, I think you don't realize all of the functions that exist.
I was going to be a hand model. I don't know if you could tell that. But what was it? I mean, what was the thing?
When I went to university, I first of all thought I would design.
Yeah.
But I think that's natural. I think that you don't know, again, all the other functions.
Yeah.
And so when I was literally the first quarter, and I'm in a design class, and I was okay. I could sew. I could make my own patterns and things. But I had a very strong opinion on what everybody else was doing. And I had an incredible professor come over at one point. She goes, I know you're in these merchandising and marketing. She goes, my instincts are you're probably less of a creative designer, but you're what we call a merchant and a marketer. You have a very strong opinion on what everyone else is doing and how they should do things and get it out there. But I find you less interested in, and she was right. I kind of stopped some of the design classes and leaned over more into merchandising and marketing.
But it's kind of amazing that this professor, freshman, I don't know if it was freshman year or whatever, early in your sees this in you, and then, years later, you're the CEO of Burberry. It is interesting, a teacher telling you to take, because most teachers maybe wouldn't have the guts to tell a student, like, hey, you know what, this might not be your thing because you're really good at this. Did you ever feel, I mean, obviously it's worked out, things happen for a reason, but maybe I should have stuck with the design part because I could have probably done that too. Or do you think that's why you were a good CEO of a fashion company, because you weren't just a numbers person, you understood that. You were much more of a creative soul who just happened to be in a CEO role.
Yeah, and this is like a lot of years ago, right? And so they didn't talk about the right brain and the left brain, and they didn't talk about instincts but I think she had been there so long that she could see that whether it was my personality or it was how she just felt I would be better over here. And I absolutely think you're right. I think that now there's books written on it, right?
Yeah.
Daniel Pink and, using your whole mind. And I mean, I learned to use my instincts, and I always say, and then I would go back and confuse myself with the facts. And then I learned by the time I got to Apple and they had me meet with, these psychological, this guy that did the whole Lamaker program for them that Korn Ferry then since bought. And they had me meet the guy that founded it and interviewed me for like 45 minutes. And he finally looked at me and he goes, you're one of the 9%.
Yeah.
I said, 9%. He goes, only 9% of the people in the world use their right and their left brain equally. So every question he asked me would bounce back and forth, et cetera. And I've never heard that fact, and I never knew what I did.
How do I get to be part of the 9%ers?
But I never knew what I did. Growing up, you feel like you're odd. Because you don't think like everybody else thinks, right? And I was raised to use my parents were both very intuitive because they were more creative. When I was growing up, that wasn't an accepted thing, right? Everything was rote memorization, and everything was the interesting thing, which I feel so incredibly grateful for, is, with this future that's coming, this world of AI, there's going to be more kids that are going to have to learn. It's the instincts that you have as a creative that are going to keep, keep you ahead and your peers ahead. And to me, the whole future is leaning towards that, where who knew back then? I mean, I just felt like a misfit most of the time.
Yeah. Well, it served you well. It's 9%. I've never heard that stat either. I'm going to go to get tested. I don't know where you get this testing. I want that accreditation of the 9%. I'm kind of kidding, but not kidding.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting thing because I kind of feel like I'm pretty good at this and I'm pretty good at that. Maybe not the best at either one, but I'm pretty good, and maybe it makes me a good CCO. I'm not quite sure. But let's talk a little bit, change gears slightly, about your incredible partnership with Christopher Bailey at Burberry. He was the chief creative officer, and I think he was president, and you can tell a little bit more than I, but how you found him and what that partnership was like, and we can get talking about how it led to Mark and I and me coming to WPP. But I'd love to hear that story, or at least certainly I've heard it a bit, but I want the audience to hear it too.
For Burberry, he actually found me, I think, more than me finding him. But we had...
See, you already made my story better right there. Correcting. I like it.
When I was at Donna Karan, he was going to Central St. Martin's, and Donna was one of the mentors there, and he had won a design award that year. And as a part of that, then he came to New York and worked with Donna, for 6 to 12 months or something. And so he was young and right out of school, and I'm running Donna's collection business and working 80 hours a week, and 9 times out, and he's in New York all by himself, and so 9 times out of 10. He's there alone at 8 o'clock at night, and I'm kind of wandering the halls, making sure everything's shut down, et cetera. And there'd be Christopher sketching away, and so we'd have lovely conversations. I mean, he's such a deep, soulful, bright.
I've never met him, but I've watched him online.
There was a lovely bond, that was kind of formed, and then after a couple of years, he left Donna and went to work with Tom Ford at Gucci.
Yeah.
And then after a number of years at Tom, then Rosemary Bravo hired him back at Burberry, and so. When she was looking to transition, I guess she had a conversation with him, and he kind of threw my name into the pot. And it's funny because we had never worked together that closely, and now it's like, 12, 15 years on.
Yeah.
He's got all this incredible experience, and he's the...
But I remembered you spending time with him, which is an interesting thing.
Yeah, and running her luxury business for her, around the world, et cetera. So that kind of started the conversation. And I was, since at another company, et cetera, and had a lot more commercial experience. I had been, it was called LCI, the corporation, and we would acquire, 2 to 3 companies a year, and so it was a very big business. I was overseeing about 22 different businesses, and when Burberry first called, I'm kind of like, that sounds boring. One brand? I mean, I get to play with all these founders and all these.
Well, we're in London, so it is Burberry.
Yeah. Well, and it was interesting because they were like, oh no, you have no idea how complex this is, because there's all types of things all over the world, et cetera. Then when Christopher and I first met, again after a number of years. And we had a lovely lunch, and we both said I think he was just senior designer or something at that point, and I'd never been a CEO, and we just decided, sitting there at lunch, we said, could we create the type of company that we both always dreamed of working for? And that was from the types of products to the culture to the people. I mean, we had this lovely conversation, and on the back of a napkin, we kind of wrote down those top 10 things that were so important to us. And we kind of always stayed true to that. We talked about the check, which had become so ubiquitous, and what we would do. And by the time we left, would everyone realized when they bought a piece of check that it meant something really important. And on the back of that napkin, we talked about creating the Burberry Foundation, because nothing existed, and how we wanted a percentage of our profits. And how would we get that money? Well, when someone bought a check, a percentage would go into the Burberry Foundation, et cetera, et cetera. So we kind of really reconnected. And I think that what happens is, he was such a brilliant creative and a wonderful, smart person. And, I guess he respected me. But when your values align, he's from north of England, and I was from, the Midwest, and we were raised very similar. And I think that that's when you have this just natural trust that you say, okay, if I'm ever going to do this, if I have a partnership like that, then maybe we can go to the moon. And then I asked to meet the CFO, because again, I'm a monkey in the middle, right? I'm not him, and I'm not,
CEO is often the referee between the chief creative officer and the CFO. I've used that before. And so that partnership, I mean, you talk about trust, it's such a critical part. And the reason I ask is any CEOs out there or people who want to be CEOs, like, the reason why companies end up being wildly creative, have something to do with the creative people, but it really has to do with the CEOs. Because if the CEO wants it, I think it happens, in the end, someone has to be the final decision maker. So in that case, it was so clear from the outside when you look at it, said, okay, that partnership obviously built on trust. It's, not cliche, but it's well known that the best partnership built on trust. There was something special about it. It's a great case study of how to take a brand and turn it around without completely even, renovating it too.
There's been a couple of those written.
Yeah. Well, maybe you studied it because I think there's been a couple
on Burberry.
Yeah.
There's been a couple. It's periodically. It's so funny. I have tons of nieces and nephews, and periodically I'll have them. We're studying, Burberry this week. And but one of the most important things that I think, because I think it's a great lesson of what we're doing at WPP.
Yeah.
But when we decided to do it, the first big move I made was, if I'm going to be the CEO, I made him the CCO, the Chief Creative Officer.
Yeah.
And I told the teams up front that anything the consumer sees would go through their office first. And then, of course, we brought in an incredible COO, and we had a CFO, and anything the consumer doesn't see, that's their expertise. So we just divided, so we could divide and conquer and move forward fast, et cetera.
Sure.
But he was 10 years younger. And he could, he needed to keep us young and looking around corners. Yeah. And when the phone came out in 2007 and all the social platforms and the App Store and, streaming and all this stuff was coming out, it was more natural for him and the young teams that he was building. And so again, intuitively, with every show that came out, he naturally took us there, launched Burberry Acoustic, and was really one of the first ones to do it. I was the enabler. Yeah. I was the connector. And I think it's a big lesson, because I don't think every CEO knows it all or should know it all.
Yeah. Be curious enough to watch.
Be smart enough to bring in an incredible creative. I always say it's so interesting in traditional corporations where they have a CFO and a COO and the CEO. Yeah. In this world of AI, where's your chief creative? Because if every CEO, and they have as much weight as that COO and that the numbers are the output of the brilliant creative.
Yeah, products and the marketing, not just, the way we've crunched the numbers.
Yeah.
Well, you see what's happening today, and we were having a meeting a couple of weeks ago and talking about like commerce and how much creativity is in commerce and what Drake is doing with his home and selling products out of the virtual home. It's so interesting, and you have to be a CEO who's curious about that and then hire the kinds of people that will bring those ideas. So clearly that was the case when it came to you and Christopher. But what people might not know is I owe my at least my tenure here right now to you. When I was first joining or thinking of joining, I think Mark and I were at a really good part. We were connected. We wanted this. We shared the values of wanting to be the most creative company, all those things. But I was, very happy where I was. And he said, "Well, you should talk to Angela." And I'm like, "Well, sure, yes, I'd love to." But I swear to God, I told my wife, I'm like, "I don't even know if I'm going to take the job. I just want to speak to this woman." And you spent an hour with me. And I called the person who was negotiating for me. I said, "Just make the deal." I really trusted you, and I also was like, if this is the kind of people they have on the WPP board that care about creativity, that want to be innovators, that also have good style. It mattered to me, because not all boards have people with that kind of vision, certainly when it came to creativity. So I do want to publicly say thank you for that.
I think it was it, but I also think that we had such a deep, rich conversation that I don't think either one of us expected to have.
For sure.
It's funny because you're on the cusp of culture. You feel it, right? And we had conversations about the polarization and the divisiveness, et cetera. And and to me, it's going to take the creatives to change that narrative and to, and then if you bring in someone like you, then hopefully you will lure a lot of other like-minded people throughout all the different agencies. Because again, I truly believe that's a business model that is. I remember being exhausted after we went really deep, really
way harder
rich,
than
and
this,
it was
this podcast. It was, you talk a lot about being a sponge to learn and grow, and we've got great research people here at the corporation. Talk a little bit about that, because I love phrases. Whether it's screaming creativity or creativity is the only way to survive, I love phrases. So like the notion of being a sponge, it's such a good one, and it's so based in curiosity for me. Is that a sort of a roadmap for your growth?
It's a really, really good question. And I would say absolutely. And it's not even just the learning on your own. Why is it that they created AI? Why does, I love a new app, Inflection AI, it's called PI, which is personal intellect. Yeah. And why is it when you use it that at the end it always asks you 3 or 4 questions? Because it's learning from you, right? And they've taken that from humans.
Yeah. Strong.
But my thing is, and I've always told people, ask questions, don't make assumptions. Because when you ask questions, then people lean in. They open up, and then you have this incredibly rich, deep if I make an assumption, you're going to get defensive.
Yeah.
And you're right. So I think that's a part of learning. I think listening. Of course, you have to read and you have to, be so curious and stay on top of things. But I think also human to human.
Yeah.
And especially with big groups of people. I mean, I go in assuming I know nothing, and just listen and then ask questions. And it is amazing. I think, humans are meant to be a community right? And collaboration. I think that's how we're wired. We're not wired to survive being individuals and knowing everything ourselves.
Yeah.
And so, at least, that's the way that I found it. And again, I'm an enabler, I'm a connector. And if I can connect and unite and look around the corner and kind of help push everybody one direction, I think it's amazing. And you see it with sports teams and rock bands. And it's no different. It's when a group of humans come together and they trust each other and they want to make an impact. And what's Steve's quote? When they're crazy enough to think they can change the world, they're usually the ones that do. It's like...
Well, speaking of that small little company called Apple, we could touch on that a bit. I'm sure you've talked about it a lot, and people, have probably asked you a million times. But I do think, for our audience out there, it's hard to say, it's important because that company has taught. A lot of great companies have taught us a lot of things. But you went there, you left Burberry to go to Apple as the VP of Retail, and that title doesn't even do justice for what you did there. But tell us a little bit about, because I think what you did transforming that retail experience to such a impactful one for communities and the world.
Well, I love that you use the word impactful.
Yeah.
Because isn't that all of our mission and our purpose, right? It's like if you can't make an impact while you're here, what's it all about?
Yeah.
So I said when I took the job that it wasn't a job. It was more of a calling. One of the greatest companies on the planet. The stores were so productive financially, but the energy in them was so incredible, but they were selling hardware. When I would listen to Tim's earnings release and he's talking about the software and the services and the App Store and Apple Music and all this stuff they're doing, but you'd go into a store and nobody talked to you about any of that stuff. And so I've told this story before, but the first week that I was there, you meet with all the top executives and I ask each one of them, is Apple a noun or a verb?
It's an amazing question. To this group,
so simple,
walking in there like...
But it's so simple.
Yeah.
Is it the hardware? Is it what it is or what you can do with it?
Yeah.
And all of them said, we're a noun. Especially one of the biggest people there said, we're a noun and we'll always be a noun. It's always about the hardware. But then I met with Tim that Friday to kind of summarize, and I said, I've been asking everybody this question. I'm curious what you'd say. And he looked me right in the eyes and said, we're a verb today. It's what you do with it and how it empowers you and how it educates you. And I was like, oh, thank goodness.
So but if he was thinking that, how does these top executives not all line up with it? Was he
Well, again,
that vocal?
It's so big, right? Yeah. And the services, that was like still, more nascent.
Right.
But it's so big. Like you said, I had the title of SVP Apple Retail, but I went from 11,000 employees to 55,000 when I started, and a business that, Burberry was $3 billion when I left, and this was, I think, $38 billion or something when I started. It doesn't matter what agency you're in. It doesn't matter. Your job is to be objective and to feel and to watch and to connect the dots. I always say you got to look backwards before you look forwards. And so, you study Steve and why did he open Apple Retail? What was the purpose? And, and they don't get paid commission. He said, I want you to educate. I want everything through the lens of education. So then you go in and, okay, what are we doing to educate? They're deep knowledge on a device, but you can read all of that online too. So until we actually sat down and said, there's 50 million people that download the app, and there's 1 billion people that go to apple.com and 500 million that walk into all these stores. But how are we educating and how are they all connected? And until we actually sat down and said, okay, what is the role of the app? And what's the role of the store? And what's the role of apple.com? And we said maybe apple.com has to be the best 2D experience. They're going to go there first. They can get all the knowledge there. Maybe we don't even need to send manuals and stuff out. Direct every employee to go to apple.com. So they're all reading the same thing at the same time, right?
Kind of felt like it should have done anyway. It's such a
I think sometimes we're in these businesses head down, and sometimes you just lose your logic or your objectivity. So we spend a lot of time. You shouldn't have to toggle between two different websites, and so we kind of integrated the online. But even more importantly, we ask. We ask the 55,000 around the world what they really felt Apple should be doing more of in their community. And for 6 months, while I'm hiring and we're working on, you go in with a bit of the strategy, but I wanted everybody involved, and they knew the business. I had a learning curve. They didn't. They'd been there for years, and so they all were a part, and they picked up on Steve's education. And they said, we need to do so much more in the community for senior citizens, for teachers, for entrepreneurs. I mean, they wanted, but we hadn't given them the tools.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because you have Apple Music over here, and they owned GarageBand. And so shouldn't we be teaching or creating the next generation Apple Music kids? And we also hired a consulting firm at the very beginning, and as we were doing the internal work, and we also said, so what are the biggest societal trends the next 10 years? And at that point in time, coming out, this is nearly 10 years ago now, and coming out of Davos and et cetera, it was talking about the impact of machine learning on automation and the impact of AI on white-collar jobs, on lawyers and researchers, et cetera. And then it also called out that loneliness was the biggest disease in the world, et cetera. So we kind of had those, and we said, okay,
and some of the programs in schools were also being defunded. So there was this feel like there was no art.
What is our role?
Teaching. Yeah.
And what assets does Apple already have? And and if they're not teaching coding in the public school system, well, they had their own coding. They had Swift. And they had 1,000 educators that were kind of out there. So I said retail needed to be this lightning rod, and our tagline was, "We need to be where the best of Apple comes together." So
the internal tagline,
our internal tagline, the Today at Apple experience that was the whole transformation. The original code name for that was iOS Live. How do we make these? Because this is 98% unaided recognition, right? You've got 1 billion people looking at these. How many times a day? But when you walked into a store, you didn't see any of those. So we said, just take photos and take the App Store and take, Apple Music and take all those, take health and activity. If we transformed the sidewalls of the store and each one of those became a destination, and what products would make you better at that? And then, oh, by the way, what curriculum could we create to help you become a musician or to help you become a better photographer or a better videographer? Or we had all the assets. It was just a matter of pulling it all together, creating a vision, and then the teams all did it. We had a great internal marketing team as well.
Sure. That's not the first time we met when Today at Apple came out, but I was the jury president, as you know, of Cannes that year.
I forget.
And it won Grand Prix of Brand Experience. And it's interesting because, when you're sitting in the jury room, Tiffany Rolfe, who's a great friend of mine, the head of RGA, her husband's Dave Rolfe of WPP Production, and Hogarth at Ogilvy, she pulled it out of the garbage. Today at Apple was first. Sometimes these things get lost. Not literally the garbage. It wasn't on the short list, and you have one opportunity to bring something out. And she said, "There's this Today at Apple thing. Where is that?" And I said, "Yeah, where is that?" And we brought it back, and that's the nature of storytelling. And we sort of dissected it and said, "Listen, this is a brand who hadn't really spent a lot of time necessarily giving back to the community, other than creating the greatest products and all those things." And here is now they've taken it and said turning their stores into community centers and doing this thing and really giving back. And it went from being forgotten about to being the Grand Prix. And I remember being on stage talking about how giant this was when a brand like Apple that doesn't need to do it to drive sales, to drive anything, but felt the need to give back and have an impact on society. And I think that's why I was so passionate about it, because that's the future. Because governments do not have maybe the means or the time or whatever to help people. So brands have to. And the biggest brands
every company to lean in
biggest
how they
brands.
can.
So you see it, whether it's a Microsoft or Verizon or Unilever.
Absolutely.
And I think Apple showed that even the greatest brands that don't need to do it have to do it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's still one of the greatest things. And if you haven't seen it, Today at Apple, It's one of the greatest
It's
things.
still going live. I think they're still back to,
Yeah, of
it
course.
had a hiccup during COVID and they took a lot of it digital, but when I left, they were teaching 80,000 classes a week in all of those stores.
Come on.
The first year they taught, I don't know, a couple million kids to code, the basics of coding, on Saturday mornings, and incredibly fulfilling. And I think and helped teachers. They had Teachers Tuesdays before COVID, and they had.
So what about WPP? What was it that attracted you? You attracted me. I mean, it's a good little cycle, but what is it? What was it?
I think the most important thing for me in life, and especially at this stage in life, and I've done it kind of my whole career. It's like, I mean, it might sound really bad, but I stay in my lane, and I know my lane, and I know who I am, and I've got to be passionate about something and just love something. And yeah, you might get a lot of call for boards, but I don't think I'm good on big pharma or fossil fuel. It's just not my passion. And Ralph was my passion, and Airbnb being travel and tech, and young founders to learn from, et cetera. And then Mark called one day, and I think Jaws actually from AKQA, who I'd known before from my
lovely man,
my Burberry, my Apple days, and he called up and one day and said, we're having a top 100 or something in Brooklyn. Yeah. And Mark mentioned, our CEO, would you come and maybe speak with us, et cetera, And I was like, I would do anything for Jaws. I mean, he's just such an incredible man. And so I had coffee with Mark ahead of time, and then we did the thing, on stage for the top 100 and shared a ton of stuff. And then afterwards, Mark and I were having a cup of coffee, and he just said, would you ever consider being on our board? And I said, well, it's really funny you ask, because I left 2 kids in London. I would love to be on a UK board. And when I went through, the FTSE 100, I said there was only really one company that kind of was like, so yes, I'd love to have a conversation. It just happened. It was, and I think those are the greatest times in life when things just kind of fall into place. And
what excites you about our company? You see it from the seat at the board, and we've been in a couple of meetings, together. I get asked to go into the board once in a while, which is great. But you're seeing it from maybe 30,000 feet a bit. What's your take on us? What are you excited about? I'm excited about lots of stuff, but I'd love to hear from you about it.
I love the fact that we feel young and we feel on the move, and I feel like we're really on the forefront of a lot of the A to I stuff. We've been talking about it, with Stefan and the team for years now, and I know that some of the consolidations, I know some of the big changes are always tough, but you know what? If you don't change, you're not going to be relevant. We've got to keep evolving the structure and evolving everything, and because there's so much newness that we have to. And I would
not
say,
the next 5 years, the next.
Oh, absolutely. But what I was used to say at Burberry, I said the same thing at Apple. Whether we like it or not, the external world is 10 times more complex than it ever used to be. With all of these platforms and with AI, there's going to be so many new businesses and new things that are created. So what happens is, I think companies have to continue to simplify, because you can't have internal complexity on top of external complexity and expect to do anything at speed or scale. So I just think as we continue to simplify, that enables us then to just scale any of the new things we're working on. And, and Mark's a young CEO and you're a young CEO, so I feel like I'm most excited that we're young, we're on the move, we're not sitting still. There's a lot of work to do, but I think we're focused on the right things.
We're almost out of time. But we have rapid fire, which is fun. But I'm going to start with a big one. Might take a couple minutes to answer, which is, what do you think the future of creativity is?
Oh, that's an easy one.
Oh, it's an easy one.
It's an easy one. The future of creativity is opening up your mind, and it's dreaming again. And it is opening up your mind to things that you have never seen before, never heard before.
Yeah, we were talking about the Sphere today in Las Vegas. If you haven't seen this thing, you just can't believe it even exists.
It is almost forgetting the past.
Yeah.
And I know I used to say look backward, but no, but there is so much newness. I mean, I feel 2023 is very much like 2007. Yeah. And the world changed after 2007. Again, we had streaming and social platforms and all this stuff that we never had before. And new industries were created and built, right? Google and Meta and all of these, and they were, again, nascent back then. Well, 2023, with AI going to consumers, right? Microsoft could have launched an enterprise, but they learned from Steve taking the phone directly to consumers. So they launched chat directly, so the couple 100 million pickup in such a short period of time, there's no turning back. This is not crypto or Meta, this is here. Yeah. And now they're launching it to enterprise. But 2023 is historic. And we will look back and we'll talk about it's like before and after the phone, it'll be before and after.
Yeah.
And again, already the thousands of startups and things that are happening. And so it'll never, ever be the same. And so my thing is, you now have, somebody said today, you've got like 100,000 assistants that you can get anything from at any point in time. And so then what is the role of a creative?
Yeah.
And if it is not to lift up and to look out and to use your incredible instincts to, and again, you have to keep learning and reading and stay so aware.
And
you have to do what AI can't do.
Yeah.
You need to feel and look around corners.
And I think also have taste too, and curation.
Absolutely.
I think that's the thing that like makes art and commerce
that's
and
a
everything
given.
special is that
You bet.
if you want to break through, you've got to know what's right, what's going to hit with consumers. So it's a good way. So okay, some fun questions. What is the last song you listened to?
Oh, goodness.
Oh, listen, see, I knew I'd stump you at one point.
Well, it's really funny. I probably don't know the name of it, but my husband shared a song with me before I left, and it's some guy who has no record label, who has nothing, and he wrote some song. I think it's called Rich Men North of Richmond.
Is it a country song? Or
It's a country song. Yeah. He wrote this song, and it went viral, and now people are like calling him for record contract. He's like
Rich Man North of Richmond,
which is D.C.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a rebel song.
I'm going to find this.
And I had no idea, but he played it for me, and he's like, this guy's gone viral, you should hear this. And so I don't even know the guy's name.
Okay, hidden secret talent.
I think I'm a really good wife and a really good mom.
Oh, this is getting a lot of points out there. That's a good one. Okay, if you had to hang out with one fictional character, who would it be? You're Angela Ahrendts, so you have the leeway to change the question.
Well, it's funny. There's a country western song called Beer with Jesus. If I could have a beer with Jesus. So with all of this stuff happening in the world today and all of this stuff in Israel, I think I don't drink beer, but I'd like to have a glass of wine with Jesus.
A glass of wine? Well, which makes more sense, right? Glass of wine with Jesus. 3 items on your bucket list.
Yeah.
Jonathan writes them.
I'd love to go around the world for about 6 months and just be free and just see and just
no
decide
board
each
meetings,
week where to go and just, I drive places in America that I've never been, that I've only been over, and I'd love to travel.
Mark's gone through America on an RV. I don't know if you know that.
No,
He's
don't
He's
know
gone
that.
on an RV. Yeah, Mark Reed is
my husband said we can't do that because he's a Harley rider, and Harley riders get behind them, and he's like, no, you're never riding in one of those because they hold everybody up.
I need a shower connected to a building.
Yeah, I know.
To a
me
nice
too.
hotel.
3 things or one thing?
3 things. Yeah. Okay.
Shoot.
So drive across.
Travel the world.
Yep.
Read the couple hundred books I have piled up at home. Have the quiet time to just read through that, or maybe AI can give me the curated version of every one of them really soon. Good. And what's the third thing that I'd love to do? I wish through Save the Children or Charity Water, I hope that I can help make an impact so in not too many years there is no baby going to bed hungry every night.
Amazing to think about. A brand you can't live without.
Wow. A brand I can't live without.
This is called screaming creativity.
I mean, I could say Burberry because I live in tons of that. I only probably wear Tom Ford glasses. I could say that, but a brand I can't live without.
Doesn't have to be a fashion brand, too.
A brand I can't live without. I don't know. Maybe it's my La Mer body lotion. I mean, it's like...
See, that's a great answer.
I don't know.
A go-to karaoke song. The Rich Man from North Richmond?
I don't even know, but I only heard it once. I'm a good leader, but I'm an introvert when you make me
what's your
stand up and do something like that.
What's your husband's go-to karaoke song?
Oh, gosh, he's definitely country, so he's probably, Cody Jinks and Must Be the Whiskey.
All right, see, Must Be the Whiskey. There you go. You got your husband. Okay, last 2. Favorite social media app?
Oh, my favorite right now is PI, and it's only in beta, but you can download it free, and it's by a company, Inflection AI, and they're trying to create the most humane conversational chatbot. I have mine as a British guy, so he's fun, he's funny. I mean, and if you ask him a political question, he'll say, "Ha ha ha! I'm only a chatbot."
I'm going to be downloading this after this podcast.
It's really, really fun. It's the same guy that Mustafa created DeepMind.
Oh yeah.
It's got some great backing behind it, and it's really, really, really fun. I've really enjoyed it.
All right, I'm on it. Okay, last one. One piece of advice for your younger self.
Don't be so insecure. I had a boss one time tell me that information is power, and you have all the information, so what are you worried about? But I think all of us feel like, they call it imposter syndrome. I just call it insecurity. And I think we all have it as humans, and I think you have it when you try to work 100% on your own. But if you can learn to work with a collective, a group of people that you really trust, And then I was always like, they're going to decide, not me.
Yeah.
I'm going to learn from them, and I'll help edit and curate and make the final decision. But they're going to be united around that. So don't be so insecure. Just surround yourself with incredible people who know so much more than you do.
Well, you know way more than me, and you're an incredible person. So thank you for doing this. I know you got to run, so I appreciate you taking the time.
It's been fun. Thank you.
All right, you're the best.
Screaming Creativity is produced by WPP and Hogarth and edited by Rob C. Ward at BCW.